Ottawa is known as the festival capital of Canada and hosts over 300 festivals and countless cultural and arts events throughout the city. Uniquely situated on the border of two provinces, the nation's capital hosts events ranging from the national celebrations of Canada Day to major tourism boosters like Winterlude, the Tulip Festival, and Blues Fest. Like many other cities across Canada, when COVID-19 began, public health became Ottawa's #1 concern, and cultural leaders had to look towards an unknown time where normalcy in the arts and culture space would return. Questions of the survival of the cultural and arts industry remain, with Ottawa's cultural leaders lobbying for support. What does this mean for Canada's arts and culture industry, and how do they move forward when public health takes priority over performance and public art? I'm Shelby Travers, and I'm speaking to arts and culture leaders about the challenges in one of the most defining sectors in Canada, the arts. This is Arts, Culture, and COVID-19. Connecting with cultural leaders in Ottawa online, I really begin to understand the role that arts and culture play in the city and across Canada. Erin Benjamin is the president and CEO of the Canadian Live Music Association. She shares with me how the arts and culture industries, including the live music industry, impacts both the Canadian and Ottawa economies.
The live music industry in Canada has a significant economic footprint. We contribute approximately $3.5 billion to this country's GDP, and we create 72,000 jobs. And that doesn't take into consideration the indirect spending that can happen when you go to a show. So maybe you're taking public transportation, or you've rented a car to come in from out of town, you've taken a flight, you've got a hotel room, you're eating at a restaurant, you've booked an Uber, maybe you're stopping at the corner store to grab a bottle of water, all of the things. So the ancillary economic impact of live music is exponential. Incredibly important to our local economies, also impacts quality of life in a really meaningful way, animates our cities and towns, very much part of the night, any kind of nightlife. Creative cities draw more tourists, and tourists who come to a place to experience arts and culture are more likely to stay longer and spend more. So this has real relevance for economic impact in regions, but also in terms of quality of life. Sometimes we move to a neighborhood because it's very vibrant, etc.
Catherine Callery is Ottawa Tourism's Vice President of Destination Development.
From a tourism perspective, arts and culture is really key. It's one of the key attractors that Ottawa has as a destination. So when you consider that in Ottawa, as the nation's capital, we have 7 of the 9 national museums. So from an arts and culture standpoint, that is a real strong draw for attracting visitors to come to Ottawa, and also really for the standard of living and people's quality of life of Ottawans themselves here in town, to be able to go to a national museum or go to an art galleries, various art galleries, big and small, festivals, live music, theater performances. All of these things are wonderful experiences that Ottawa has to offer for residents and for visitors.
The impact of the pandemic has been felt across the city.
When the pandemic hit, of course, tourism really got the rug pulled out from underneath it. It created a scenario in which, no one was leaving their environment. Many people were isolated in their own homes, and we weren't able to promote tourism the way that we classically would promote tourism. Sporting events were canceled. Festivals either had to go online, go virtual, which some did, like the Tulip Festival, for example, went virtual. The Indigenous Solstice Festival went virtual for the whole month. But these are events that would have otherwise been held in person, and so they had to pivot very quickly. And so and of course, attractions like museums and galleries and so on were no longer able to welcome visitors the way that they would normally, and many of them remain closed.
Nicole Milne is the executive director of the Ottawa Arts Council, a not-for-profit that supports and advocates for artists and arts organizations in the city. As soon as the pandemic hit, they conducted a study on the impact COVID-19 would have on artists.
We put forward the COVID-19 survey out to the community about 4 days into our being into lockdown. We didn't know how long it would be, and we didn't know what the impact was going to be. The biggest takeaway that we learned in our initial survey was that emergency funding for artists was imperative. Because there are so many artists, of course, the arts, like the sports industry and the tourism industry, the arts were one of the first to shut down, especially in live performance situations, and we're going to be the last to recover. So we wanted to find out through the survey, fundamentally, what kinds of work that was already in line for our artists was going to be potentially shut down, and what areas of need they had. Emergency funding was key. There are a lot of artists that depended on reimbursement for work that they had yet to complete. And because artists live on about 14,000 to 20,000 if they're full-time artists per year, below the poverty level, we heard loud and clear that support for jobs that they were bringing forward in the future that they knew were going to be canceled was paramount. The biggest losses we saw were from the gig industry, from the live performance industry.
Their partnership with the City of Ottawa allowed them to prioritize getting funding to those who needed it. I spoke to Nicole Zuger, the program manager for the Arts and Heritage Development Branch at the City of Ottawa within Recreation, Culture and Facility Services Department. She shared with me how important it was for the city to continue to fund grassroots organizations and artists directly.
We have a set budget that's approved every year, and it's this year was about $11 million for cultural funding. And so we had to work within that budget. As you know, municipalities are in a situation that they cannot run a deficit. But, we basically, said we need this money needs to get out as quickly as possible to the community so that it stays in the community. And so I'm, very happy to report that none of that funding is being used to offset some of the city's larger revenue shortfalls. And I think the city is really hoping that the federal government will come through, and every indication is that the federal government will come through. So we're working within our budget.
I wanted to know what the reactions were from the community and how artists are adapting when the pandemic made it clear that there would be cancellations in major cultural events. When we return, I will connect with artists and arts organizations about how they've had to pivot their work. You're watching Arts, Culture, and COVID-19. Welcome back to Arts, Culture, and COVID-19. I'm Shelby Travers, and I'm talking to arts and culture professionals about the effects that COVID-19 pandemic has on their industries. As I continue my conversation with art leaders, I want to know how some artists in the City of Ottawa have shifted their work. Crying has its victims, loving has a cost. Lucas Hanneman and Megan Lawrence are musicians with the Lucas Hanneman Express. Though their work was canceled or postponed, they share with me how their band has pivoted to online performances, complemented by continuing to teach music online.
All of our students have moved to online lessons via Skype, FaceTime, WhatsApp, all of the possible platforms. And we've been very lucky that we've actually maintained all of our students that we had before the pandemic hit. So it's really great to be, valued enough by our students that they want to continue under these conditions. And also just to have that as a consistent revenue stream for us, as obviously the pandemic has taken away most of our performance opportunities. It really means a lot to us.
Ottawa Fringe was another organization that had to make a major shift.
The village rejoiced. The people rejoiced as the new soul came in.
Associate Festival Director Britt Johnston tells me that in a regular year, they usually have over 60 plays performed by artists from around the world in venues around the city, with all the revenues going towards the artists. This year, the festival had to go digital, and they focused on supporting local performers in their new format. Britt says that turning the event into an online Fringe at Home festival was the best way to connect with their audience.
We are so grateful that our audience, we have such a good following, and people were tuning in, and we did a lot of our events through Facebook Live, so the chat boxes were active and you could hear, and you know, we can't hear clapping, but people are showing their support in that chat box. So it was really nice to still feel that sense of community.
Even though Ottawa Fringe had a successful transition to digital media, Megan and Lucas tell me that the challenges still exist for them with performing because the experience is completely different from what they're used to.
It's very different. It's taught us a lot. Usually when you're performing live, you're given so much time on stage, especially when you're at when you're doing a festival, your slot is anywhere between 30 minutes to 45 to an hour. And if it's your first time showcasing, you usually want to try and fill all of that time with as much music as possible to get people to want to come to the tent, buy your CD before they leave, or any merchandise that you have, and come see you. But when you're online, you really have to take a second while Lucas is changing to grab a guitar, and you have to fill the dead space because you can't just sit there going, okay, yeah, next song, okay, yeah. Like, people want to be entertained in between. And because of the fact that online, you are actually paying attention. It's not like a restaurant where you're there with friends, you're having a good time, you're going to chat back and forth with each other. So it's really pushed me, especially. I'm not somebody who likes to talk a lot and get really nervous about doing it. And so when we do shows now, I have no choice but to speak while he's changing guitars and introduce the next song. And so that's been kind of nice. It's allowed me to come out a little bit and allowed us to share more of the responsibility in the duo context instead of it always just me looking to Lucas and being like, okay, tell them what we're doing.
Yeah, I think right now in this current age of doing shows online, it makes the artist more of a storyteller. It's more like when you see a great singer-songwriter perform, generally speaking, they're usually good storytellers because they're playing for an attentive room. Now, in our genre of music, which is more of a blues rock thing, the room can be pretty rowdy. So in our case, online, it's the exact opposite. It's basically like you're doing a permanent series of home concerts when you do an online show right now. So Megan has really stepped up to the plate, and I think has become a very good storyteller through this pandemic. You know, it's been an interesting process for sure. But it's been nice to be able to tell the stories behind songs and what they mean to us, and what we hope they mean to everybody else as well.
Filmmaker Eamon Jaffrey shares the challenges she thinks independent filmmakers will face as they try to continue making their art during the pandemic.
For example, a lot of filmmakers will go through SAW Video, our local film co-op, to rent equipment at a lower rate than some of the standard production houses. And that's really, they're not available right now. And then even if they were available, they have to quarantine the equipment. So that adds delays to when you can rent equipment.
She worries that the priority might not be for the independent artists like herself. Instead, the priority will go to commercial productions.
They have the money to, spend whatever they need, versus independent filmmakers, you're always thinking about your budget and how much you have available. So that's a big thing. And then the other challenge I would say for independent filmmakers too is access to locations and the flexibility in accessing certain locations, because right now, you want to be at a safe distance from the public and from other people, but then some places are still closed. So it really limits your options. It's hard enough trying to figure out how to get crews and budget, but then now you have to think about that too.
Liz Winkler is the artistic director of Propeller Dance Studio, a dance company dedicated to supporting contemporary integrated dance for people with disabilities in Ottawa. Liz shares with me how Propeller Dance students are adapting to the changes.
We've been thrilled with the fact that they seem to be able to show up on the Zoom call with enough support. So I think that says good things, that people are really committed to their Propeller Dance classes, and that the support that people that they have recognize that it's really important to them. So in that way, people seem to be getting the support they need. But what I see too is, say you had your eyes on everybody in a class, 20 students in a studio, you're going to be speaking to them to get them involved, right? How do you do that on a Zoom call? I don't think you can teach and keep an eye on people at the same time. So maybe we need to use our dance support specialist to keep an eye on everybody. And then how do they then interact with them? You know, like, so there's all those steps, like, can they use the chat?
Coming up, arts and culture leaders will share with me what they think the future of their industry will look like. You're watching Arts, Culture, and COVID-19. Welcome back to Arts, Culture, and COVID-19. I'm Shelby Travers, and I've been talking to arts professionals from Ottawa about arts and culture industry being affected by COVID-19. What's clear to me is that across Canada, performers are adapting, but the recovery of the arts and culture industries won't be quick. While this world's in quarantine. Aaron Benjamin, CEO and president of the Canadian Live Music Association, shares with me how much of a hit the live music industry in Canada will take as the pandemic continues.
For those who are not able to innovate in Ottawa, their doors are closed. I mean, it's small live music venues, if they don't have a patio or food service, there's absolutely no reason for them to open. They can't open. Opening at small, reduced capacity, the math doesn't work. And so an industry that was already very cash-based and in some cases very fragile is in the most precarious position it's ever been in its history. And what this means is, ultimately we may see a great sort of retraction of live music spaces, and that impact therefore on artists and community is, it's really yet to be tallied, but it will be significant. We're predicting 96% of our members will close without sector-specific support from the federal government. Significant sector-specific support, not just emergency funding. So long-term recovery dollars.
Even with these bleak numbers, Lucas Hanneman reminds us why music is an essential part of our lives.
What would a world be like without music? How would we, as a society, be joyful? I mean, if you think about your favorite movies, there's always music that goes along with those movies. There's always music that goes along with TV shows that you love. And I really feel like the music is what makes us feel when we watch something that we truly love. I think, if you watch a horror movie, for instance, without a soundtrack, you're not going to feel nearly as afraid. So I think that, music really does a lot to shape our joy as a society. It does a lot to shape our dreams. It does a lot to shape our ambitions. And certainly we connect music with memories that we have from childhood, from our earliest possible memories, maybe especially for musicians, but my earliest memories are tied to music. So I do not believe that society will exist without music. I feel like music is certainly going to find a way to weather the storm and continue through this pandemic.
For Ottawa Fringe, Britt Johnston tells me that moving forward, even beyond the pandemic, Ottawa Fringe is going to consider digital content for the festival as a part of their future accessibility considerations.
We've been working with an Access Points Advisory Committee, which has been addressing accessibility in our own festival and in our own venues. So this going online and working with them, it's made us realize that this is needed and wanted from the community. We do have our own venue, and we've made it so it's physically accessible, but that still doesn't mean that people are able to go to the theater. And so why people shouldn't have to miss out on the art. And this is a way to, bring and engage the community here.
Aaron Benjamin predicts technology's role in digital performances moving forward.
We will continue to see venues and other live music companies and organizations innovate and share things online. Those who can manage it will open their venues at whatever capacity they're allowed to do so. at and share that content with those who can be in this space, and then digitally for others who can't be there based on numbers. We will see, I think we'll see a lot of new technology that will facilitate the connection of artists and fans beyond things like Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. We'll see a lot more monetization of the digital live music experience. So you'll be, instead of streaming your artist friend's show from their living room on Facebook for nothing and maybe throwing $10 in the tip jar, you'll buy a ticket to that show moving forward, I think. We may be a few months out from that, but I really hope that's the case, because as a quick sidebar, we've gone back 20 years in terms of the perceived value of live music. It has become free again, and this is a huge problem.
For Liz Winkler and Propeller Dance, she feels optimistic because of the support they are receiving from the community and from funders.
I think that we're in a good position in the sense that we're a known organization. And so the funding bodies and the donors, I think, are being pretty generous right now when they see and understand what an organization is all about. Mm-hmm. Like, it is a time of a lot of asking and a lot of giving, you know, and the funding bodies have been very understanding about the fact that we've had to provide things online. There are emergency funds now from different levels of funding and different levels of government. And so now we need to be thinking about, what is the emergency? Is the emergency that not all students have the technology at home, you know, or is the emergency that those students might need a different kind of support, and we need to think about that. So we're asking the students right now, that's sort of, you know, the process is like, ask the existing students, how is this working for you? What's not working? Also, like you say about space, if it's a dance class, you don't want to be glued to the screen, right? Mm-hmm. How do you get a give and take of time on the screen and time in your space? And how do you account for the fact that not everybody's got equal space either in their homes? Mm-hmm. So there's lots of questions and stuff, but at the same time, this is a good time for me as the sort of an arts administrator, because there's so many webinars available and networking with other people to say what's working for you, and people are being super generous right now.
And generosity is important. At a time when so many are struggling, the message I heard from all of the artists and cultural organizations I spoke to is to continue to support the arts and culture industries as best as you can right now. Even with the struggle across the industry, Erin Benjamin does lend some levity to future predictions.
For those who can withstand the financial burden, they'll be shuttered, and they will reopen when it's safe to do so. And that could be post-vaccine, or, you know, intense restriction time. And if that happens, then I think we'll see greater capacity and hopefully as much return to sort of the old normal as possible.
Host, Shelby Travers. Producer, Emily Ramsey. Videographer and editor, Darcy DeTony. Media accessibility specialist, M. Williams. Audio post, Mark Phoenix. Graphics, Mike Smith. Senior producer, Michelle Dudas. President and CEO, David Arrington. Copyright 2020 Accessible Media Inc.